Tim Lincecum is a unique talent. There's no question about that. The question is, with his size and his unusual mechanics, is he going to be a durable pitcher? Let's take a quick look at his mechanics, because they are unusual, to try to answer that question. Lincecum comes to the major leagues as a phenom, blowing through the minor leagues. He has many moving parts, but watch, he's extremely consistent. What he does on each and every pitch is the same muscular action, the same kinetic chain, the same results with many of the pitches. Now, what he lacks at this point is command, but he certainly has consistency. That rotation, that coiling, and that insanely fast arm speed, you see some good results. One key here that I like, he keeps his head very still. He's focused on his catcher's glove, and his head remains very still despite all the moving parts and violent action. There's a little bit of kick there at the end, but if you remember back to when we talked about Felix Hernandez and his head flying out, Lincecum has none of those problems. But one of the keys that he does have is hip rotation. Now, the power comes not just from his insane arm speed, but that coiling action, the hip rotation. You see him virtually turning his back, and the uncoiling, but he has such fast arm action that he's able to. That hip rotation is where he generates a lot of his power, rather than from the legs when we see someone like Roger Clemens. Now, the one thing that does concern me is how much he has the back bend. He's trained his back and his oblique muscles to take this hard force, not only the back bend, but the incredibly quick twist. One of the things we have to consider is how specific is this? If there's one small change, there could be a problem. We know in college he injured his back swinging a bat. That speaks to specificity. Even the smallest change in his pitching mechanics could throw off the muscles he's trained since a youth. Chris Lincecum, Tim Lincecum's father, who trained him from childhood, built his motion off of Sandy Koufax. So let's take a look at Koufax here. And you can see some similarities. Koufax was taller, but really, you don't see a whole lot of things besides the great arm action and the great extension there on the fastball. Koufax had that long looping windup, a high leg kick, and then brought it through with a long delivery. Now, you don't see the coiling, you don't see the hip turn, you just see very solid arm speed. We see him frozen here, the leg is up, there's absolutely no turn back, the hips are not coiled or even tight, and we see him pitching uphill. He's barely peeking out over his front shoulder to the hitter, and that long looping action is what allowed him to get the arm speed, but he's much more compact than even Lincecum is now. Roy Oswalt, he's somebody that Lincecum is often compared to, mostly because of their height. Same frame, same size, and often the same results, but their mechanics are not similar at all. Now, as we watch this side-by-side video, you see that Oswalt is much more compact, much more linear. You don't see him making that big hip turn, but you see him driving with his legs through. Oswalt has a quicker pace, fewer moving parts, more easily replicable. You see here in this freeze frame that Lincecum has fully turned his back. Oswalt has stayed very linear. He doesn't have to bring the ball through as far. Luckily, Lincecum has the arm speed to be able to do that. But again, similar results from very different actions. Now, let's take a look at his repertoire. Mostly, it's fastballs. He has a just devastating 94 to 96 mile-an-hour fastball that you can see rides in and even has what pitchers call a hop at the end. When he keeps it low, it's unhittable. When he brings it up in the zone, nobody can catch up. He doesn't have the greatest command of it at all times because there's so much movement. He throws the ball towards a location, but you seldom see the catcher being able to keep his glove still. Now, when he leaves it up, you can see what happens. His curveball is what scouts call a power curve. It's not the big looping thing you see from Barry Zito or Rich Hill. It's much tighter. It's much quicker. It drops off, more like a split-finger fastball. What he doesn't have with it is control. He does have a tendency to leave it up, and he does have a tendency to leave it outside the zone, but combined with a 94 to 96 mile-an-hour fastball, definitely a strong pitch. Changeup, not a strong pitch. At best, it's a work in progress, but more likely this is just a show-me pitch. His changeup has been clocked anywhere from 82 to 88 miles an hour. He's got to get a little more consistent with this. Tim Lincecum's an interesting pitcher. He's certainly a great talent, but whether he's a durable and consistent one remains to be seen.